Today's winner broke a more than 2-year-long race winless streak, and it's not the guy we spent most of the year talking about. It was somebody else. Let's talk about today's race at Dover. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Today's race at Dover pretty much went exactly as expected. I talked about it in one of my episodes last week at the very end. I mentioned how Dover, as we saw in the spring with this aero package, particularly with that huge rear spoiler and the already high speeds, high corner speeds we see at Dover, we knew it was going to be hard to pass. We knew today's race was kind of going to look like that, but I figured we'd still see some playoff implications because there's one trend I've noticed the last few years, especially since we've done this knockout round format for the playoffs. When the playoffs start, a lot of the contenders just get sloppy. That's the word I've been using a lot lately because that's just the word that I think fits best. I mean, last week, Alex Bowman wrecking on lap 1, sloppy. And then a lot of mechanical failures we saw in the first round, and today, plenty of mechanical failures. It's just those are mistakes or just issues that these teams don't have in the regular season, but for some reason, when the playoffs roll around, that's when they present themselves. It's just sloppy. So today's Dover race did not have a lot of action on the track. I'll just be honest, not a lot of passing. A few good battles here and there, mainly presented by crazy lap traffic. Not any wrecks. There was no spins, no wrecks whatsoever. I think there was one caution that wasn't for the stages, and it was because it was for debris for like on lap 7. But this race still had some major playoff implications, so there are still some pretty big storylines, especially going into next week at Talladega where it's going to be a wild card. There was still plenty of things to talk about at the end of this race, so I'm going to do my best to address as many of these topics as I possibly can in this video. Let's just go ahead and start by talking about the top finishers in this race. Kyle Larson was your race winner, his first points-paying win of the year. He did win the All-Star race back in May, but this was Kyle Larson's first race win in more than 2 years. And because he won the first race here in the round of 12, this is also the first time in Kyle Larson's career that he will be advancing past this round. He has never made it to the round of 8 before, but this year he will do just that thanks to this win today at Dover. It was not a dominating win, although he did dominate pretty much the final 100 laps or so of this race. I feel like Kyle Larson has kind of flown under the radar most of this year, mainly because for a lot of the season he's been overshadowed by his teammate Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch, throughout much of the regular season, he got that win earlier in the year at Kentucky. He was consistently in the top 5, top 10, was always around 7th or so in points pretty much the entire season. Meanwhile, Kyle Larson always seemed to be just a few positions worse. He was making mistakes. He had that bright moment in the All-Star race, obviously, but he would make more mistakes than Kurt Busch was, and was just lagging behind generally. However, since the playoffs have started, Kurt Busch had so many issues in the first round, some of his own doing, some not, cost him to be eliminated early. Kyle Larson, though, the last few weeks, has quietly been one of the best and most consistent drivers in the field. He is a dark horse championship contender, and I think today's win at Dover is finally going to bring a lot of that to light. I was looking at Kyle Larson's last 9 or 10 finishes or so. 5th, 8th, 3rd, 6th, 2nd, and then he wrecked at Indianapolis, but then 8th, 6th, and 13th at the Roval last week, but now a win today. That's a lot of top 10s and top 5s the last 2 months. That team has figured something out. Now I know the round of 8, those tracks don't really fit too well for him. He's not great at Martinsville, Texas, Phoenix, he's okay at, I guess. But the win today, those extra 5 points, definitely going to be helpful. He's got a shot. He has an outside shot of making it to Homestead. I know for years now, we've all kind of, our mouths have watered at the idea of seeing Larson in contention at Homestead because of, historically that track, you like to run the high side. Larson's good at running the high side. With this package this year, that might change a little bit, but still, Larson at Homestead, we've seen in the past, is a thing of beauty. If he makes it to Homestead, watch out for Kyle Larson in that 42 car. That's still a long ways off. Dover, Kyle Larson's always been good at Dover, so we expected him to run well today, so this wasn't like a shocking performance or anything, but it's kind of in line with how he's run the last few months. Really consistent, consistently near the front, top 5, and that's what he did today. So it's a new side of Kyle Larson, that consistency. That's, I think, one thing that's been missing from him in his career. He's been very up or down, hit or miss, inconsistent. That consistency the last couple months might come into play at the perfect time of the season. All right, let's talk about some of the guys he beat. A lot of Gibbs cars there in the top 5, top 6. Martin Truex Jr. finished 2nd. He kind of threw this race away on pit road. Track position was extremely important because it was very hard to pass on the final pit stops of the day, caution flag pit stops. Martin Truex Jr. had a pit crew guy slip and fall. The front tire changer slipped. That cost him just about a second, maybe 2 seconds, and cost him 5 spots on pit road. He went from leading to back in 6th, and that's really what I think opened the door for Larson to drive off and hide. Was Truex really faster than Kyle Larson Larson at the end there? Maybe not. I think they're pretty equal, but if he had not had that issue on pit road, he would have been in control of that final restart and probably would not have gotten passed by Larson had that been the case. But because he had to play catch-up, there's not much he could do there. But still a great performance for Truex at all three of the ovals so far in these playoffs. He has not finished worse than second, so he will be a force to be reckoned with. Alex Bowman, he's been in the headlines last couple weeks after run-ins with Austin Dillon and then Bubba Wallace, and even today with Ryan Blaney a little bit. But he finished third. Very strong performance. Carried the banner for Hendrick after Chase Elliott had mechanical failures early on. But Alex Bowman, this was a huge performance for him because making it through the round of 16 was impressive, but to make it through that round of 12, he needs to consistently run top 5 in all three of these races because unlike some of these other guys he's racing against, he does not have very many playoff points to work with. Now we'll look at the standings briefly here in a moment, but with this strong performance, he is now in a decent spot. Still not a great spot. You know, finishing third, you'd expect to be in a really good playoff spot, but no, he's still not in a great spot because he's already in a hole due to his lack of playoff points. But a great performance from Alex Bowman, a gutsy performance after being sick a week ago after having all the drama on and off the track this week. Gutsy performance, good solid run for him. He was the best Hendrick car today, mainly because Chase Elliott had issues. I'll talk about Chase Elliott briefly because as you see, he's not there in the top 20. He finished basically in dead last. Engine failure on lap 7 put the defending winner of this race specifically out of the race very early on and now outside of the top 8 in points. Riding so high with such good momentum after a great win at the Roval. Now he is really going to be playing catch-up going to Talladega and Kansas. Let's move quicker here. Kevin Harvick, a strong 4th place finish in the Harvick beer car. Still the only SHR driver that actually looks like he might contend for something this year. Another really strong performance from him. Denny Hamlin 5th. He dominated the first 70% of this race, led almost every lap. But you could tell he was just hanging on to the track position. Once he fell back, once Truex got by him, once Larson and Harvick, some of these other guys got by him, you could tell he really was just a 5th place car. Still a good performance. Denny Hamlin started on pole for this race. He was my championship pick once the playoffs started, and this race today was probably the best overall race I've seen from that team since the playoffs started. Joe Gibbs Racing is obviously really strong. You got 3 cars there in the top 6, but Denny Hamlin, Truex has been the best so far of them for these playoffs, and Denny Hamlin has been lagging a little bit further behind. Still appears to be slightly behind, but I think Hamlin, at this point, he could still get to Homestead, and if he gets to Homestead, I still think he's going to be very competitive. Kyle Busch finishes 6th in this race. I think it's fair to worry a little bit about Kyle Busch right now, not because he's having awful races or anything like that, but his performance in these playoffs, I know he finished 2nd at Richmond, but his performance overall in these playoffs, and even the few weeks leading up to the playoffs, has not been typical Kyle Busch-like performance. I feel like typically if you're a driver leading the race and you look in your rearview mirror and you see Kyle Busch in 2nd, you get worried because Kyle Busch is usually coming for you. He's usually going to get by you. But nowadays he finished 2nd at Richmond. Remember he couldn't get by Eric Jones at Darlington. I feel like Kyle Busch, they're still really good, but I feel like they're missing something. They started this year, with like 13 or 14 straight top 10 finishes? That's not the team I see right now. It looks like he has an 8th place car every week, and that's, with all the playoff points he has, that'll get you to the round of 8, probably get you to the round of 4. But I don't think that's going to win you a championship. And I think that's why a lot of people have moved away from him as their championship pick, whereas early in the year, I think we all thought Kyle Busch was clearly the guy to beat. Nowadays, people are looking at Truex, looking at Hamlin. Some people are looking at Chase Elliott. Some people now might even be looking at Kyle Larson. And for good reason. Kyle Busch, these last 3 races, he was 19th in Vegas, 2nd at Richmond, good there, but then 37th at the Roval, and then 6th here today, not bad, but he's not as fast as his teammates. So that might be an issue. Matt DiBenedetto, attaboy for the 7th place finish. Jimmy Johnson, a solid 8th place finish. Bowyer 10th, Byron 13th after a costly speeding penalty. Now I gotta talk about Team Penske because the only Penske driver you see there is Brad Keselowski in a measly 11th place. Team Penske had an awful day. Started on the pace laps when Joey Logano broke an axle, I guess. I don't know if we ever actually confirmed what the issue was, but he broke something in the rear of the car, and he didn't even start the race on time. He started the race 24 laps later. So Logano was out before the race even started. He's basically going to use up all those playoff points he had. I think he's right there on the bubble now, which is, he should be thankful. People say the regular season doesn't matter anymore, and it definitely doesn't matter as much as it used to, but it still matters. If Logano didn't have some of that success he had in the regular season, winning races and stages, he would be in a huge hole right now. Luckily, he has some of that to fall back on. But Logano was out of it on lap 0. And then Ryan Blaney kind of had some mechanical issues we thought early on in the race. They really didn't show up and rear their ugly head until late in the race when he had to retire from the race in the final 100 laps or so. So Blaney finished 35th, and unlike Logano, he does not have playoff points to mess with. So Ryan Blaney's definitely in a deep, deep hole. And given that team's lackluster performance the last few weeks, I don't think Blaney's moving on past this round. He's going to need to pull off a miracle at Talladega, I think. Otherwise, I don't think it's happening. With that all being said, let's look at the playoff standings right now after one race here in the round of 12. Yes, I did just take a photo of the NBC broadcast on my laptop because I like the way they organize it. It's easy to follow. Anyway, Larson's locked in. You look at the Gibbs cars up there, Truex, Hamlin, Busch, all had good finishes today. Also had a ton of playoff points to their credit. credit. They're plenty good in my opinion. Harvick as well. I think Talladega, they shouldn't be that worried. Even if they wreck out at Talladega, they'll still be to the good. Keselowski's plus 20. He's been historically good in this Talladega race, so hopefully he can avoid trouble. Bowman plus 17, not bad at all. But then 8th through 12th, all these drivers had issues today. Some of them had catastrophic issues. The fact that Logano is still tied for the last spot, despite not even starting this race on time, is quite impressive. You see there, Clint Boyer finished in the top 10, but because he has had no success this season, he's still 4 points out. Chase Elliott with his failure, only 7 points behind. That's not bad at all. He's really probably thankful that Logano, that Byron had some issues. And then Ryan Blaney, 22 points out. That's why I think he's almost in must-win territory at this point. I think Talladega is going to be extremely important for Ryan Blaney. A very good chance for him to hopefully make up a lot of points. It's definitely not panic time for guys like Byron, Logano, Boyer, or Chase Elliott. Elliott's been really good at Talladega and Kansas in recent years, so I expect Elliott to be competitive. Obviously, you get taken out at Talladega, anything can happen. It's going to be an insane race, not just because I think this package has proven to be pretty entertaining at these super speedway races this year, but also because it is a super speedway race. Pack racing, anything can happen. You can be taken out easily by someone else's mistake, and even if you don't really make a mistake, you can go from 1st to 12th in half a lap and cost yourself a lot of valuable points. Talladega is going to be wild. I'm going to be there for the first time ever. I'm really excited about that. I'll have some more updates on that as we get closer to this weekend. I'll be there filming and everything. Playoff standings are probably going to change quite a bit, even just after stage 1 of that race. Anyway, I've talked about the finishers. I've talked about the point standings now as they look after one race in this round. Let's talk a little bit now about the racing at Dover. A lot of people are going to have hot takes, hot opinions on this one because, as we saw in the spring, this aero package does not work at Dover. It does not make the racing more entertaining, does not make the racing better. Obviously, that's subjective. Some people might have really liked what they saw here today, but I'm trying to speak for what I believe the vast majority of NASCAR fans, at least the ones that watch my channel, believe, and I think most fans would agree in this case that Dover was less entertaining this year than it has been in other years. And it's mainly because of this package. The larger rear spoiler especially and the high downforce creates a much larger dirty air wake, which makes it a lot harder to pass. Guys can't run in the same line as the person in front of them because it alters the handling of their car too much. They have to move up, they have to move down, and Dover is usually pretty good at being a multi-groove track, but sometimes that still isn't enough to overcome the dirty air problem. So that was really the story of today. We did not see a lot of passing today. We saw a lot of instances where a driver or car who seemed to be clearly faster than the guy in front of them could not easily make that pass. I thought Martin Truex Jr. was probably the only guy out there that was able to consistently pass guys that were slower than him, whereas most of the other drivers at some point or another struggled with that. And that's frustrating to watch when you know you're better and some invisible force, air in this case, is preventing you from performing at your highest level. I can understand why that's frustrating because it's frustrating to watch. It really is. This race still had some really good moments. There was a great 4-car battle for the lead towards the end of stage 2 where they were actually swapping positions pretty regularly. However, that was mainly created due to Logano, a lap down car, kind of holding up the leaders. So when guys were stuck in lap traffic, it was still pretty entertaining. However, a lot of this race was run under green flag conditions, so the field got so strung out that rarely were the leaders caught up in major lap traffic. So it really just didn't present that many great passing opportunities, and you still hate to watch a race where you're solely dependent on other cars to make for yourself to make moves. This is one of the, I think, more glaring examples this year of a track where the new aero package made it worse. You know, when we first went to Pocono, it was obviously worse, but they fixed Pocono. They had grip strips, and it made Pocono actually decent the second time we went there. We noticed it with the first time we went to Michigan. I thought it was kind of hit or miss whether or not that was considered a good race. They made some changes. I thought the second Michigan race was better. Dover, however, first race and second race, neither were that good, and I think it was largely due to the aero package. Dover's always been a tough track to pass on. However, the aero package clearly exacerbates this issue even more. I don't know what the answer is. NASCAR is obviously going to stick with this package for 2020, mainly because they don't want to force all the teams to build something completely new just for one temporary year. So I understand why NASCAR's keeping this package next year. I raised the question on Twitter because I don't know much about this. How much would it really cost teams to just swap out spoilers race to race? Like some tracks, the big mile and a half, sure, we run the huge spoiler, but maybe at tracks like Dover or Richmond, maybe we run a smaller spoiler. I don't know. I know part of the reason this package exists this year is to cut costs for teams. NASCAR wanted to kind of create one uniform package that could basically be used everywhere without having to make major changes each week. That would help cut costs for teams. The problem is just this package it's not a one-size-fits-all. It works really well at some of the mile and a halves. It works well at the plate tracks or the super speedway tracks. It doesn't work at Dover, and it doesn't work at Richmond. So I'd like to see some small changes, and I feel like the spoiler alone, if you just reduce the size of that by a few inches, could make a pretty big difference at a track like Dover. I don't know if that's something NASCAR would ever look towards doing in the future. I feel like that, though, might be a quick fix that wouldn't cost teams very much money. So I have no idea how much things cost, though, so I might be completely way off in speculating on that one, but I just want to throw that out there because today's race, I don't really want to watch this race again. I don't want to go to Dover next year if this is going to be the package because it wasn't that entertaining. Let's go and put it on the Groovy Gauge, though. We had an amazing race at the Roval last week. Of an entertaining race at the Roval. Some of the racing was hit or miss, but the entertainment factor last week was through the roof. I gave it like a 90 or 95%, something like that. This week's race at Dover, by comparison, is going to be quite a bit lower. I'm going to give today's race a 35% on the Groovy Gauge. I think that's one of the lowest scores I've given this year. I think I've only given 2 or 3 scores down in the 30% range. So this is probably one of the lower scores this year. And I've kind of already explained why. It was just annoying that you couldn't pass. I mean, you could pass, but you had to work really hard at it, and you usually had to rely on someone else getting in your competitor's way. This race finished with only 8 drivers on the lead lap. I think the 13th place car was 2 laps down, so, I mean, if you're an old school NASCAR fan who likes the days in the 60s and stuff where 2 guys finished on the lead lap, maybe you love this race. I have no idea, but I know personally, I did not. But as usual, that is just my opinion. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought of today's race, what you're looking forward to for Talladega next week, and what your reaction is to the whole point situation now. With all the troubles that Penske guys had, that Chase Elliott had, what do you think of their chances of moving on? Let me know in the comments what you guys think, or follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, let me know on there. Big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters, Michael Harrison, at Chivas of the Stars, Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason Arlong, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, TheRacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Lucius, Jeremy Conklin, Emilio Garcia, Joey DiMacchino, Sky Racing Forum, Bryce Schumacher, Scott McNew, Colton Austin, Bradley Pelletier, and the rest of these incredible Patreon supporters. Really appreciate the support from all of you. It really helps the show continue to grow and do better things. And I couldn't do it without you, so thank you. Gonna have a couple more videos up later this week talking about the news, previewing Talladega. I'm really excited to be there. I've never been to Talladega. Well, I've been to Talladega, not for a race though. I've just driven by the track when I was younger. I remember driving by and seeing it over looming in the distance like, whoa. That's Talladega. That's a big racetrack right there. I'm excited to go there though, as a fan, to watch a race. That's going to be exciting. Another bucket list item checked off. This year's been crazy with just checking off bucket list items. Saw Matt Kenseth win in Wisconsin, went to Bristol, the night race, now go to Talladega. That's 3 big checks right there. This has been a crazy year. Couldn't do it without all the support I've gotten from you guys watching and all the new people that continue to come to this channel that are interested in NASCAR, interested in what I have to say about it. It really is incredible and very humbling. And we're almost to 100,000 subscribers, so continue to share this, continue to get the word out, because I got big plans hopefully once we eclipse that goal. Anyway, y'all, thank you again for watching. I'll be back later this week with more episodes. I'll see you then. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your weekend.